You think you know betrayal? Let me tell you about the man I loved, the fashion empire we built together, and the beautiful, magnificent lie it was all founded on. They say a single thread can unravel a masterpiece. In my case, it was a pair of old, forgotten tailor's shears. This isn't just a story about revenge. It's about how I took back my name, my voice, and my art, by burning his legacy to the ground in front of the entire world. So, picture this. New York City. The air crackles with that pre-Fashion Week energy. It's a city that breathes ambition. And at the very top of that food chain was Croft. Our brand. Or, so I thought. My name is Alara Vance. For 7 years, I was the silent partner, the heart, they called me. The chief textile designer for the House of Croft. My fiancé, Julian Croft, was the sun everyone orbited. He was breathtakingly charismatic. When he walked into a room, cameras flashed, critics swooned, and money just appeared. He had this way of talking about fabric like it was poetry, about a silhouette like it was a symphony. He was the visionary. The genius. And then there was his sister, Seraphina. Sarah. She was the brain. All sharp angles, sharper business sense, and a permanent, vaguely disapproving look on her face. She ran the numbers, managed the press, and never let me forget that creativity doesn't pay the bills. The three of us were a triangle. Julian was the dazzling public face. Sarah was the ruthless engine. And I was the ghost in the machine. I worked in a sun-drenched studio in our shared Tribeca loft, surrounded by bolts of silk, sketches, and half-finished patterns. I was the one who translated Julian's grand, vague ideas into tangible art. He'd say, "Alara, darling. I'm feeling shattered moonlight on water." And I would spend the next 2 weeks developing a liquid metal silk charmeuse that would make the critics weep. We were unstoppable. He was my muse, my partner, my future husband. We were 2 weeks away from our biggest show ever. The show that was supposed to cement the Croft legacy forever. But legacies have a funny way of turning into epitaphs. It happened on a Tuesday. I remember the smell of rain on the pavement. I was draping the final look for the show, a gown of that shattered moonlight silk, when my phone rang. It was Sarah. Her voice was different. Brittle. "Alara," she said, her voice clipped. "There's been an accident. It's Julian. They said his car went off the road on his way back from a meeting upstate. A single vehicle crash. No witnesses. Just gone. The genius of his generation, silenced in an instant." The funeral was a media circus. A sea of black designer outfits and crocodile tears. Anna Wintour was there. So were half the editors from Paris. They all spoke of Julian's singular, explosive talent. His unparalleled vision. I stood beside Sarah, a ghost in a black dress, listening to them eulogize a man they only half knew. Sarah held my hand, her grip surprisingly tight. "We have to be strong, Alara," she whispered, her voice a perfect performance of grief. For his legacy. But in the days that followed, his legacy started to look a lot like Sarah's corporate takeover. First, it was small things. She'd gently suggest changes to the tribute collection we were now preparing. Julian would have wanted it cleaner, more commercial, she'd say, waving a dismissive hand at my more intricate designs. Then, my name started disappearing from press releases. I was no longer the co-creator. I was Julian's grieving fiancé. Then, nothing. Just a footnote. The breaking point came a week after the funeral. I was in the studio, trying to find the strength to work, when Sarah walked in. She didn't knock. She was holding a stack of legal documents. "Alara," she began, her tone all business. We need to discuss your transition out of the company. I stared at her. My transition? Julian's passing changes everything, she said, not a flicker of emotion in her eyes. The board and I have decided that the Croft brand needs to move forward with a unified vision. Your artisanal approach, it was Julian's indulgence. It's not financially viable. My blood ran cold. My approach? Sarah, I designed every piece in this room. Julian and I built this together. She gave a small, cruel smile. The kind that doesn't reach the eyes. Oh, sweetie. You sewed. Julian was the genius. You were his muse. Muses are replaceable. Legacies aren't. That was the core wound. Not just Julian's death, but the cold, calculated erasure of my entire existence. She was stealing my life's work, my past, my future, all in the name of his legacy. That night, numb and adrift, I started packing up my things in the studio. My personal items. That's when I saw them. Lying on Julian's private desk, almost hidden beneath a stack of magazines. A pair of antique tailor's shears. They were heavy, silver, with ornate handles. He'd always had them. He called them his good luck charm, but he never let me use them. He was strangely possessive of them. They're just for inspiration, darling, he'd say. Too old to be practical. I picked them up. The weight felt significant. I ran my thumb over the handle and felt a small, almost imperceptible click. A tiny section of the ornate scrollwork shifted. It wasn't just a design. It was a latch. Inside the hollow handle was a single, old-fashioned brass key. It was taped to a small, yellowed piece of paper with an address scrawled in Julian's handwriting. An address in a forgotten industrial part of Brooklyn. I had nothing left to lose. So I took the key. The address led me to a decrepit brick building, sandwiched between a shuttered warehouse and a graffiti-covered wall. It looked like the kind of place dreams go to die. Not the inspiration space of a fashion icon. The air inside was thick with the smell of dust, old wool, and something else, cedar. It wasn't a studio. It was a time capsule. A long-abandoned tailor's workshop. Bolts of vintage fabric, decades old, lined the walls. Spools of thread, bleached by time, sat on wooden racks. And in the center of the room was a single, large, dust-covered steamer trunk, secured with a heavy padlock. The brass key from the shears slid into the lock. My heart was pounding. I didn't know what I expected to find. Love letters? Old debts? It was so much worse. The trunk was filled with sketchbooks. Dozens of them. Leather-bound, filled with page after page of designs. The paper was brittle with age, the pencil lines faded. But the drawings were electric. They were raw, brilliant, visionary. And they were all signed with a name I didn't recognize, Mateo Martinez. I sank to my knees, my breath catching in my throat. I started flipping through the pages, a cold dread creeping up my spine. There it was. The sketch for our first award-winning coat from 2017. And the initial design for the origami dress that got us into vogue. The foundational patterns, the core concepts, the signature draping techniques, everything. Everything that had defined the Croft genius was in these books. Stolen. Tucked at the bottom of the trunk was a faded photograph. A much younger Julian, beaming, standing next to an older, kind-eyed man with work-worn hands. Mateo Martinez. And scribbled on the back of the photo, my brilliant mentor. The true master. 2014. The man I loved, the visionary, the genius, was a thief. Our entire empire, my entire career, our love story, it was all built on the ghost of this man, Mateo Martinez. The shattered moonlight on water wasn't Julian's poetry. It was Matteo's. I felt a fresh wave of grief, but this time it was laced with a white-hot, clarifying rage. Who was Matteo Martinez? What happened to him? I spent the next 2 days digging. A few old articles mentioned a reclusive but brilliant pattern maker from Brooklyn who had vanished from the scene years ago after a personal tragedy. I found a public records listing for the workshop's ownership. It was still in the Martinez name. And there was a contact number. For his son. His name was Leo Martinez. I met him at a Greasy Spoon diner near the workshop. He had his father's eyes, dark and intelligent, but clouded with a permanent cynicism. He was a construction foreman, his hands calloused, his posture defensive. He knew who I was the second I walked in. Elara Vance, he said, not as a question. He didn't offer to shake my hand. Let me guess. Julian Croft finally kicked the bucket and you're here to tie up loose ends. I didn't know, I whispered, pushing one of the sketchbooks across the table. I swear to you, I had no idea. He opened it, his expression unreadable. He traced one of the designs with his finger, a flicker of old pain crossing his face. My father, he said, his voice low and gravelly. He took Julian in. Saw this spark in him. Taught him everything. Treated him like a son. And when my dad got sick, really sick, Julian visited him in the hospital, told him he'd protect his work, that he'd make sure his legacy lived on. Leo laughed, a bitter, harsh sound. Instead, he cleaned out the workshop. Took the books, the patterns, everything. My father died thinking his life's work was safe. Julian Croft built his kingdom on my father's grave. I told him about Sarah, about her erasing me from the company. About her plans for the tribute gala that was set to be the biggest event of Fashion Week. Leo just stared at me. So the snake and his sister stole from both of us. What do you want from me? Sympathy? No, I said, my voice finding a strength I didn't know I possessed. I want justice. Or maybe just revenge. Your father's books, they're not just proof. They're a weapon. Sarah thinks she's inherited a legacy. I want to show the world it was never theirs to begin with. For the first time, a spark of interest lit up his eyes. How? She's planning a tribute show, I said, an idea, wild and terrifying, taking root in my mind. She's honoring a ghost. What if we showed them the real ghost? I'm a designer, Leo. A damn good one. These sketches, they're a foundation. I can bring them to life. Not as copies. As evolutions. We can create a new collection. The one your father never got to make. A long silence hung between us. He looked from the sketchbook to my face, searching for something. Finally, he gave a slow, deliberate nod. All right, Vance, he said, a grim smile touching his lips. You want to burn it all down? I'll bring the gasoline. That was the beginning. Leo and I, we were a strange alliance. The jaded son and the betrayed fiancé. He didn't trust me, not at first. But he saw the fire in my eyes. And I saw the deep, unspoken grief in his. We were united by Julian's shadow. Leo cleared out his father's old workshop. We scrubbed away the years of dust, oiled the antique sewing machines, and turned that forgotten space into our secret headquarters. For the first time in my life, I wasn't designing for Julian, or for the Croft brand, or for the critics. I was designing for Matteo. For myself. I pored over Matteo's sketchbooks. His genius wasn't just in the designs, it was in the construction, the unconventional use of materials. It was a language I understood intimately. I wasn't just recreating his work, I was having a conversation with him across time. I took his raw, brilliant ideas and infused them with my own sensibility, my expertise in textiles. The clothes that began to take shape on the mannequins were breathtaking. They were an echo of Matteo's soul, but they sang with my voice. Meanwhile, Sarah was on a media blitz. Magazine covers, morning show interviews, all about Julian's tragic genius and her solemn duty to carry his torch. She announced that Julian Croft, a legacy in silk, Gala at the Met. It was going to be the event of the year. I knew I had to face her. Not to plead, but to test the waters. To see her arrogance up close. I arranged a meeting at the Croft headquarters under the pretense of collecting the last of my personal belongings. She met me in the main showroom, looking impossibly chic and powerful. "Ilara," she said, with manufactured pity. "I hope you're doing better." "I know, Sarah," I said, my voice even. I held up a small, framed photo from the workshop, the one of Julian and Matteo. "I know where the Croft genius really came from." She glanced at the photo and her mask of sympathy dropped, replaced by pure, unadulterated contempt. That's ancient history. Whatever bargain Julian made with that old man died with him. You have nothing. No proof that any of this," she gestured around the glittering showroom, "isn't 100% Croft." She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a vicious whisper. "Let me be very clear. Julian was the star. You were a seamstress who got lucky. This empire is mine now. You are nothing. A footnote. So take your little trinkets and go disappear quietly. It's the most graceful thing you can do." I just looked at her. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just let her words hang in the air, fueling the fire inside me. I saw the truth then. She knew. Maybe she knew all along. She wasn't just protecting her brother's legacy, she was protecting her own fraudulent claim to power. I walked out of that showroom with a newfound clarity. This wasn't just about exposing a lie anymore. It was about reclaiming my own identity. Leo and I worked like maniacs. He sold his truck to fund our fabric orders. I cashed out the small savings I had. We called in favors from old contacts, pattern makers and cutters who had been loyal to me, not the Croft name. Using Leo's connections, we secured a small, raw, industrial space for a fringe fashion week presentation. Our official plan was to launch a small, independent capsule collection. Our real plan was much, much bigger. We created 12 looks. Each one a direct, evolved descendant of a design in Matteo's sketchbooks. Each one a masterpiece. The final piece of the puzzle came from a tech-savvy cousin of Leo's who specialized in event A/V. For a case of very expensive bourbon, he agreed he could, shall we say, reroute a video feed. The night before the gala, our collection was ready. The stage was set. The plan was in motion. I looked at the 12 incredible garments hanging in a row, a testament to 2 stolen legacies, now intertwined. This was our moment. This was the turning of the tide. The night of the gala was a spectacle of obscene wealth and performative grief. The Met's Grand Hall was dripping with chandeliers and fashion's elite. I watched a live feed from our gritty Brooklyn workshop, my heart hammering against my ribs. Leo stood beside me, his hands clenched into fists. Our models were lined up, their faces fierce and determined. On the screen, Sarah took the stage. She was wearing a stunning black Croft gown, one of the last designs I had worked on. She looked every bit the grieving sister, the powerful heiress. Julian Croft wasn't just my brother, she began, her voice thick with fake emotion. He was a force of nature. A singular talent who painted with fabric and thread. His vision was pure, untouched, and it came from a place of genius few of us will ever understand. Tonight, we honor that singular vision. We present his final, breathtaking collection, a tribute to a legacy that will live forever. The audience was rapt. The lights dimmed. The music for her runway show began to swell, a dramatic, overwrought orchestral piece. "Now," I whispered to Leo's cousin. On the massive screens flanking the stage at the Met, where slick promotional videos were supposed to play, something else appeared. The feed flickered. And then, instead of Sarah's polished runway, our show exploded onto the screens. The contrast was jarring. Our models weren't walking on a pristine white stage. They were storming down a runway of raw concrete, flanked by exposed brick and chain-link fences. The lighting was stark. The music was a pulsing heartbeat. And the clothes silenced the room. The first model wore a coat of deep indigo wool, its architecture a clear echo of Croft's first-ever signature piece, but bolder, more alive. Then a gown of crimson silk, its draping a masterclass that put the tribute collection to shame. Back at the Met, there was chaos. Sarah was frozen on stage, her face a mask of disbelief turning to sheer, unadulterated horror. Technicians were scrambling. But it was too late. We had them. After the sixth look, the feed cut to Leo. He was standing in his father's workshop, holding one of the original sketchbooks, open to the design for the very coat that had just appeared on screen. "My name is Leo Martinez," he said, his voice steady and clear, booming through the Met sound system. "The man you're honoring tonight, Julian Croft, was my father's student. The singular vision you're celebrating was the life's work of Mateo Martinez. A genius Julian Croft buried so he could build an empire on his bones." He held up another book. And another. Page after page of proof. The camera panned across the original sketches, undeniable and damning. Then, the feed cut to me. I was standing at the end of our runway, surrounded by my 12 designs. I looked directly into the camera. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. "My name is Alara Vance," I said. "For 7 years, I helped shape the House of Croft. Sarah Croft called me a footnote. She tried to erase me. But genius isn't stolen. And a voice, once it's found, cannot be silenced." I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. This collection is not a tribute to a lie. It is the resurrection of a truth. It honors the legacy of Mateo Martinez, and it marks the beginning of my own. I gestured to the models behind me. This is not Croft. This is Vance Martinez. The feed cut to black. The fallout was nuclear. The gala ended in shambles. The press didn't just walk out, they ran. By morning, #CroftIsAFraud was trending worldwide. Every major news outlet was running the story, complete with side-by-side comparisons of Mateo's sketches and Croft's iconic designs. The House of Croft didn't just stumble, it imploded. Investors pulled out. Retailers canceled orders. Sarah became a pariah overnight, her empire of lies crumbling into dust. She was left with nothing but a tarnished name and a warehouse full of clothes that now screamed plagiarism. And us? Vance Martinez was born in fire. We were the story of the year. The underdogs who took on the giant and won with nothing but truth and thread. We were inundated with offers, with investors who wanted to back our authenticity, our story. It's 6 months later now. Our workshop in Brooklyn is no longer a secret. It's a bustling atelier, the hottest new label in New York. Leo runs the business side, he has his mother's sharp mind, it turns out. And me. I've never felt more free. I design for myself now. For Leo. For the ghost of Mateo, whose legacy we finally honored. I found out that a lie, no matter how beautiful, eventually unravels. And sometimes, the most satisfying revenge isn't about destruction. It's about building something true and beautiful and lasting from the ashes. I didn't just get even. I got my voice back. And it's a voice they'll never be able to silence again. And that is how I unraveled a fashion empire and stitched my own name into its place. If you were on the edge of your seat through my story, do me a favor and hit that like button. It lets me know you're out there. And for more stories of justice and unbelievable revenge, make sure you subscribe and ring that notification bell. Let me know in the comments, what would you have done? Thanks for listening.